Right now, switch your family to T-Mobile and get 4 lines for $25 a line with AutoPay and 5G access included on America's largest 5G network. So don't wait. Get unlimited and nationwide 5G access for the whole family for just $25 a line. Visit a T-Mobile store or T-Mobile.com today.
Plus taxes and fees. Customers may notice lower speeds and further reduction if using over 50 gigs a month due to data prioritization. Video at 480p. Unlimited while on our network. Qualifying credit and 4+ lines required. Capable device required for 5G. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain features. See T-Mobile.com.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 9 of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. I'm your host, Rich Butler, and if this is your first time checking out Toys and Tech of the Trade, just a little background. Toys and Tech of the Trade shines the spotlight on entrepreneurs, creatives, content creators, bloggers, vloggers, you name it, and we deconstruct not only the origin stories of their business, but also the gear, whether it's the gadgets or the software that they use to run their business, create their content, etc. But, of course, on the toy side of things, we shift focus on the things that make them happy, the toys that complete their day, whether it's something as simple as Funko Pops to collecting cars to collecting musical instruments, whatever the case may be. Toys in this particular instance should be in quotes. My guest for this episode is a very unique individual. His name is Brock McGoff, and he is the editor-in-chief and founder of The Modest Man. It is a blog for men under 5'8". And you're probably asking yourself, what does a blog about men under 5'8" have to offer me, whether it's because you're over 5'8" or just because you're not into men's fashion, etc. But Brock's story is very interesting because when you are under 5'8", and I'm definitely under 5'8", for those of you that know me personally, you know that. For those of you that don't, a little personal insight. As someone under 5'8", one of the toughest things in the world is trying to find clothes. And as someone who, grew up in a single parent household, it wasn't like I was learning, hey, this is the right shoes to go with this suit, et cetera, et cetera. It was a lot of trial and error to establish my own style. And as I got older and went into the corporate world, I started reading like menswear blogs, different publications, etc. And, you try and pull from it what you can. But at the end of the day, you're never going to get a complete picture because a lot of the individuals pictured in these articles and features is not like you. And while, I've been a weightlifter all my life, and that's makes a different set of complications when it comes to buying clothes. Being under 5'8" is something that, as you get into the professional space, is, it's tough. It's tough to buy stuff, especially because a lot of stuff has to be tapered, has to be fitted. You spend a lot of money on alterations. You just want to look your best. And as someone who was entering into, this corporate atmosphere at the age of 19, after my mom died, I was like, man, I think I got it, but, I'm not all there yet. So I started reading a blog named Mansion. It's Mansion. And in the midst of reading that blog, I forgot if it was a recommendation from another reader, etc. For people under 5'8". They were like, oh, you should check out The Modest Man. And I started reading it, and I was really blown away by the transparency of Brock's content, just getting advice from somebody who made it seem effortless, just knowing, hey, these are the alterations you should look for. These are some of the brands I recommend, etc. And in addition to that, Brock gave a lot of insight into how he ran his business. He would share income reports. He would share partnerships, the highs, the lows. And it was something that helped me as a reader connect with him and then that audience. Not only because obviously the content was tailored for someone like me to an extent, but also because it was just very, very real. Of course, as a fan of the blog, I wanted to reach out to Brock and also, number one, share his story, but number two, give you guys, that 5149, give you guys that value. If you're looking to get into a particular niche and you're not sure if the niche is going to be successful, you just gotta stay the course and work at it, because there's an audience for everything. There's an audience for people that collect teacups to people that collect, funky colored ties, etc. There's a community for everyone. And in Brock's case, it not only is a community that was underserved in terms of content and everything else, but it was also a community that, when harnessed correctly, not only became a strong business for Brock, but also created various opportunities for him as well, including a podcast and a host of other businesses and partnerships. But you know what? Don't take my word for it. Don't let me sell you on it. Let me share with you the toys and tech of Brock McGoff's trade. Let's get to it. All right, my guest for this episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade is Brock McGoff. Brock is founder and editor-in-chief of The Modest Man. The Modest Man is a style blog for men under 5'8" and emphasizes looking your best on any occasion. Brock, thank you for taking the time to sit down with us.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
It's funny. I came across your blog years ago, and it was because I was reading a gentleman's blog, but his name I think was Paul Byrne, and he had a blog out. And as somebody who's under 5'8", it's always, the thing that jumped out was the opening explanation for your blog is like, listen, you want to look your best, you can't buy stuff off the rack. And as somebody being under 5'8", it was always a challenge. It's either massive alterations or depending on what style of clothes you're into, you're always stuck. You're always stuck at either having to jump through 17 different hoops. And I appreciated what your blog brought to the table at the time, and I kept following it. And I really, really enjoyed the content just because you didn't try to make it, you weren't pushing an agenda. It was very raw, especially because, you being in the same boat, you used a lot of firsthand experience to tell the story and showcase certain brands and certain things. I like, you did a piece not that long ago about, bodybuilders under, short bodybuilders, which was pretty cool because as someone who's a weightlifter, I connected with a lot of those guys like Franco Columbu, a lot of those guys. So it was very cool to see that. I appreciate what you've done in the space,
Yeah, man. I'm glad it's been useful. I'm happy to hear that you've been following it for a while. And yeah, I think, part of what I'm trying to do is educate, and just show people, here's some mistakes I made trying to learn how to dress myself as an adult. And, especially as a shorter guy, you run into specific challenges. And then the other part is just to kind of inspire people. And that's where that kind of content, like looking at some bodybuilders who happen to be below average height, just guys who, maybe they weren't dealt a perfect genetic hand, but they kind of did big things anyway. So I think that combo of kind of educating people, how to dress well, regardless of your stature, and then inspiring by showing people who've done big things with their life, despite that kind of built-in height prejudice. That's sort of what my mission is.
Now, I want to get into the origin story of how this all, how you set about just doing this. Did this just start on a whim? Was it something that kind of you started it just as a way to vent frustrations and pass on value to others? Where did the inspiration come from for The Modest Man?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just listening to your episode with Greg, who is it Greg Clunas? Is that how you say his last name?
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome guy, first of all. I actually hadn't heard of him until I listened to your episode. Really, really cool guy, but his origin story kind of reminded me of my own because I got into the world of online marketing and content creation in almost the exact same way as he did. I was working in I graduated from college with a degree in psychology, decided not to go on for a master's and, Psych D or PhD. I was just kind of done with school and I was working in a marketing job. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I actually read this book by Tim Ferriss called 4 Hour Workweek, which I'm sure, a lot of your listeners are familiar with.
Ruined my life.
That one, right?
That book ruined my life. And I say that in the most positive way possible. Shout out to Tim. I read that book and I just came home and I said, I hate the job, just because it was like that moment of clarity, so I feel you on that.
Dude, the exact same thing happened to me where it's funny. People are so quick to recommend books, and that is the only book that I can say actually changed my life. Like, I read it and I was like, oh, there's another way to live. Like, you don't have to do this 9-to-5 grind that you hate for the rest of your life. There's another way to do it. And it kind of set me on this whole course. But I got into affiliate marketing and niche websites and WordPress and blogging and SEO, got really deep into SEO. And, I tried a bunch of stuff with varying degrees of failure before I started The Modest Man. And The Modest Man kind of came out because I was, at the same time that I was getting into this world of online marketing, I was still working in like a corporate job, and I was not a well-dressed guy. I was dressing like I did in college, basically. Like, my clothes were too big. I didn't even know that I wasn't dressing well. People don't tell you that. And when I started caring about my appearance and trying to improve my appearance, I went to Google like anybody else does. And like you, I found all these really cool style blogs, but a lot of their stuff I found wasn't super helpful because the actual clothing recommendations they were making wouldn't work for me. They say, hey, wear these jeans, and they'd be 6 inches too long. So I had to learn about alterations and where to shop and how to get custom clothes and all this other stuff. And so I kind of started Modest Man thinking, okay, here's a kind of a niche website that I could actually enjoy creating content for, and maybe I could help some other people, because if I'm dealing with these problems, there's got to be millions of other guys dealing with them too.
Well, that, for me, it's funny. I remember when I first started reading your blog, and I think I said I fall into the big and small category, in the sense that I'm 5'6", but I've been lifting weights since I was 14. So it's like, I got to get double XL shirts. My legs are kind of big. So then I got to go and get pants altered and buy a bigger waist size. So it's pretty funny that, when I came across that, I said to myself, damn, this guy gets it. And I think that that's a big problem just across the board. I think that especially when you're starting a business, you kind of have to niche down to where you're passionate about something because it's in your wheelhouse. For you, like that's what made it, like I said, so simple to get into your content. Number one, obviously we had similarities, but number two, it came from a genuine place. And I think that when you started this endeavor, did you ever think it would get to where it is now? I mean, I appreciate your transparency with revenue and everything else, which we'll get into in a few minutes, but I think just doing that and keeping it so clear cut. Did you want that from the onset, or did you want initially just to share your experiences and make recommendations, and then you just went down the path of being super transparent?
Well, I didn't go into it with the the mission to be transparent necessarily, but I definitely went into it thinking it could be like a small, relatively passive business. I wasn't doing it just for fun, although it was fun. But yeah, I went into it thinking, this could turn into something. I didn't know how big the potential upside was. And I remember talking to, and I've been doing this I'm in my 6th year now, so it's it takes a while. It doesn't have to take that long, but it does take a while to build up an online audience, as you know.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, dude. But I remember talking to maybe I was 3 years in, and I was talking to Antonio Centeno, who runs a brand called Real Men Real Style, and he was one of the first other bloggers or YouTubers that I had connected with in that space in the men's style world. And I remember him telling me, hey, Modest Man could definitely be a 6-figure business. And at the time, I remember thinking wow, that would be crazy. No way. What would it take for it to get there? And now. And I'm by no means rich. It is a 6-figure business, low 6 figures, but now I see that there's so much more potential. Like a website or a digital media company, a digital brand can be a 7-figure, an 8-figure business. So I think you just don't know that until you kind of see it for yourself.
Well, I think one of the things that gets me, especially with things like this, is that people expect the overnight success story, and that's why I like doing these interviews, because there is no overnight success story unless you win the lotto the next day. People don't see, people see the steak, they don't see the sizzle. They see a lot of, oh, this is, vicariously through social media, but there's a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of trial and error. I mean, you just said it before that you did so much prior, and then, you just found what worked for you and took off. I mean, when that guy told you that you could turn this into a 6-figure business, did that just light a fire to say, you know what, I want to see if I can do it? Or did you just figure, hey, if I build towards it, great. If not, at least it's a great project,
It was definitely a bit of an eye-opening experience. And I remember I talked to my dad around the same time, who's an entrepreneur. And, I told him, actually, this is a separate conversation, but I remember telling him the first time I had a $10,000 revenue month. And, instead of reacting like, wow, he said that's great, but instead of saying like, wow, that's amazing, he said, why not 100? Like, what would it take? And I think that kind of bigger picture, like 10X thinking, is very eye-opening. It's good thought exercise, if nothing else, because it makes you think, okay, what would it take to do that? Like maybe you have to hire some writers, maybe you have to do something totally different than what you're doing now. So yeah, I think that was a very pivotal time. And at that time I was working in digital marketing, and I had a good job. It was a really good job, and it was a fun job. And but I knew at that point the Modest Man was big enough that I knew my job was temporary. And I, every day that I went to work, I looked at it as a fundraising exercise. I wasn't looking at it as a career. I was raising money for the eventual quit.
Nice. That's a great way to look at it. And I think that's a very actionable way for those of us that are still juggling that 9 to 5, check off all the boxes, lifestyle, where you're using your job to fund your dream, but you still have to put in the work to chase that dream. I mean, you were working in that space. What was your work day usually? An 8-hour work day, 40-hour week, and then you were doing the Modest Man on the side, and then pushing it out constantly.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty much every lunch break, either taking calls for Modest Man, or I had a bunch of freelance work on the side in digital marketing, just trying to raise money, and writing during downtime, and so yeah, I think you gotta want it. It's going to take a while, and I think that's why it's so important to choose an industry or a niche that you actually care about, because if you don't, you're going to burn out for sure.
I think that's definitely one of the toughest things, that burnout. And, I want to ask about that, just like the highs and the lows when you were going out and trying to monetize the Modest Man. What was probably your biggest high point in the beginning, in the infancy of the project? Not minus all the big stuff that's happened that we'll get into, but I mean like that first big break where you were like, damn, this is the one, to get the ball rolling. Yeah.
I mean, the first really cool thing that happened was the first time a brand sent me something, and I was just like, wow, this is a free pair of jeans, this is amazing. Yep. And by the way, I still think, if you look at my Instagram story right now, I unboxed on my Instagram this morning. I still think it's amazing. I'm still super flattered anytime anybody sends something, but that was just this moment where I'm like, wow, I have this audience is valuable, valuable enough for a company to send something for free. The next iteration of that was when a brand said, hey, can we buy a banner ad space for a month? And that was actual money. That's even more tangible than free products, because you can use money to pay your rent. So that was a really cool moment. And I remember talking to another guy who I met really early on, Aaron Marino, who runs a channel called Alpha M.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, he's got a huge YouTube channel, and I've known those guys for a long time now. And I remember talking to him about how to monetize this stuff and how to build an audience, and he's really big on sponsorship. So that was his advice early on, was, hey, start working with brands. And I got pretty deep into sponsorships for a while, which I don't really do as much now, but I do remember the first time that I got a decent sponsorship with a brand. And it was one of those things where I think a lot of people underprice themselves. And Aaron had told me, he's like, listen, what would you charge right now if a brand reached out? And I say, I don't know, maybe $500. He's like, $2,500. He's like, just say $2,500 and see what they say, because the worst they can say is no. And I remember the first time I told a brand it would be $2,500 for a content package, and they said yes. and just being blown away that would happen, that kind of deal could happen. And that was definitely like a turning point.
Now, what did that at that time? If you can recall, what did $2,500 get a brand at that point when you pitched that?
So at that point, that was like my top of the line premium offerings. That was like a video, an article, and a couple of Instagram posts, and like inclusion in an email newsletter. That was like everything I had to offer in one package.
Nice. Well, the thing about that is when you are you at liberty to divulge the brand, or?
I don't usually talk about the specific brands. This one
Okay.
was a watch company, but
all right.
But yeah, I mean the thing is that there's no consistency with like size of brands or like different product categories. Like it's totally the Wild West of like influencer marketing right now. So
yep,
I really haven't found. Yeah. So and with the whole sponsorship thing, I mean, some brands like they want to see like immediate ROI. Like if they spend $2,500, they got to get that $2,500 back within 30 days. Other brands, they're like, no, we just want branding.
Your audience.
We just want like, we just want to be exposed to your audience in a way that aligns with our brand. So it kind of just depends what the brand wants.
Well, it's funny because I know on your site, you have some disclaimers about how you handle sponsorships and how you handle certain things, and I like that because I think that some people, they're just like, oh man, I got this website, I'm just gonna let whoever advertise. Like in our case, we get reached out for advertising, and I don't want to promote gambling on my site, because I'm like, I like, gambling's cool and all, but I have a demo that skews between young and old, so I don't want some young kid to come and, next thing you know, so, they're looking at gambling websites or something like that. Like, I don't want to be part of that, so I kind of skew in that. How do you, when it comes to refusing, how do you tackle that? Because a lot of people, they're just like, well, just say no. But when you're starting out and you're trying to make money, where do you draw the line at that point?
Yeah, I'd say that's like one of the toughest parts of this kind of like online publishing game, which, podcasts are crazy popular right now for advertising. I'm sure you guys get pitched all the time, and it is hard to turn down revenue, So I think you have to think, who are you? Like what kind of person do you want to be? And in a few years, when you look back, will you be proud of that piece of content that you put out or that sponsorship that you took on? Is it something that you would buy for yourself? Is it something that you would recommend to a close friend? And if it's not, then I really think it's worth your kind of integrity and the long-term trust of your audience to say no to anything that's not like a really, really good fit.
Yeah, I respect that. I mean, sometimes like we get stuff and I'm like, no, I'm going to pass on it. Usually it's, guest posts, the old guest post email. And I'm like, listen, we don't want to do that. Doesn't align with what we do. And I think that's a big part of what's going on because it's almost like there's not a handbook out there for this. It's like, hey, start a blog and put up, advertising and you'll get paid and you'll make hundreds of. It's like, it's not really that simple. And I think that's that's something, watching your journey and how you've approached a lot of these partnerships and a lot of the way that you talk about brands. I mean, I saw your last, income report, how you doubled down and started doing more YouTube and doing some of that content. And I wanted to get into that because do you feel that there's been a bigger shift now, with with YouTube and Instagram more so than just the written word? It's always weird because a lot of people are divided, but I figured I'd ask you because you've kind of evolved into those spaces on the back of your written content.
Totally. Yeah. That's exactly what I've been trying to do. And I think video is kind of too big to ignore for certain industries. If your subject matter is inherently visual, it kind of makes sense to be on YouTube or Instagram. And I agree that I think it is a little split right now. It's like there are people who read and listen to podcasts and audiobooks, and then there are people who watch videos. And of course, there's like a lot of middle ground and crossover, but I've kind of found with my audience that the audience I built up on the blog didn't necessarily just like rush over to YouTube and vice versa. So the audience that I've built up on YouTube don't really go over to the website very often. And so you kind of have to either syndicate your content like across those different formats or or really think like, or think like what is the best place for this piece of content? Because sometimes it doesn't make sense, to have the same content everywhere. So that's a tricky one, but I think video is very, very important right now.
With the rise of video, and you mentioned Alpha M. There's a couple of guys. I think it's Zaniga that does Teaching Men's Fashion. Like it's funny because obviously the YouTube algorithm is cranking it out once you watch one or two videos, and the space is very interesting with the people that are in it. But my thing is when you're trying to carve out your niche, like when you started doing more video, how did it feel like putting yourself out there visually? Because that's one thing that people don't get into, especially when we're talking about, especially, being under 5'8", et cetera, all this stuff. How did you tackle that next facet when you were like, I got to start doing more YouTube stuff. I got to put myself out there? Because again, written, a photo here and there, maybe an event here and there, it's a lot different than putting yourself out there and, millions of people are just going to dissect you the minute they hit play,
Yeah. I mean, video is like a totally different animal for a lot of those reasons that you mentioned. And, on one hand, I like it because I think it's very hard it's much harder to conceal who you are on video. It's very easy on Instagram or in writing, to kind of create an image for yourself. But in video, if you're sitting there talking to the camera, people are going to know who you are. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, or on the other side of the coin, YouTube is just like a cesspool of negativity and trolls,
Oh, it's so bad, man. I
don't know why it's so much worse than other. I really don't know what makes it different, but it can be brutal.
I read a piece recently. I'm sure Pat Flynn. He wrote a piece about his son starting a channel, and like somebody wrote in like the comments, there's a 12-year-old boy like, oh, kill yourself, and I'm like, and he wrote about in his, he asked his son like, do you want to still keep making videos? And that's a tough conversation. And his son was like, yeah, because that person was having a bad day. And I'm like, wow, like it just summed
up. That kid is
up.
Wise beyond his years.
You hit the nail right on the head. I was like, holy crap. But the fact that is out there in that capacity is scary. And that's why, with tackling the subject matter that you do, and, height bias, cause it does happen, it's out there. It's interesting that as you've approached this, it's tougher, man. It's tougher, and you got to get some thicker skin. Cause I'm sure you've got a couple of gems in the videos you've put on. You're just like, oh man, there's always got to be one.
Oh yeah. I mean, you have so many people just leaving like hateful comments and, making fun of your height or whatever else. I mean, honestly, whatever you look like, you're going to get trolls on YouTube. And I think one of the things I try to do, which some of the bigger channels probably just don't have the capacity to do, is I try to curate the comments a little bit. So,
yep.
If someone leaves just like a straight up hateful comment or uses, I have like a list of banned words, I'll ban them. I'll delete the comment and ban them from the channel. And because I don't want, when someone's watching one of my videos and they scroll down to the comments, I don't want it to be just a mess. Like I want it to be an actual conversation.
I agree.
And so I'm going to do that as long as I can. Hopefully the channel gets to the point where that'll be harder to do. Maybe I'll have to like get somebody to help with moderation. But right now I'm handling that.
Good. I mean, I'm glad that you do that, because that was my next question. Do you delete them? Because some people, they're just like, hey, I leave it there, warts and all, because at the end of the day, if my audience is as ride or die as I think they are, they're gonna take care of it for me. And to a point, I kind of feel that there has to be some self-policing. Like don't get me wrong, it's cool if your audience is gonna be like, yeah, man, don't write that, don't be that guy, and that's cool and all. But at the end of the day, it's your brand, and you can curate the messages and the commentary as you see fit. I personally am a big believer in just, if that stuff is way too out of line, you just delete it.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, you're doing the site, you're doing YouTube, you're doing the podcast, which I wanted to get into, the Buttoned Up podcast, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because was that the next progression for you? You were like, all right, let's do this podcast, and there's a great story of how you met your co-host, which I want to get into as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love podcasts. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I love the audio format. I listen to Audible all the time. I always thought about maybe starting something, and there wasn't really anything. There wasn't much going on in the men's style world in terms of podcasts. but I didn't have any immediate plans to do it. And it wasn't something that I really wanted to take on my own. So it was just kind of like serendipitous that John Shanahan happened to reach out, who's, another YouTuber. I didn't even know him. It was a cold email, and I'll have to share it sometimes. It was like the most compelling cold email I've ever read, and basically convinced me after one email and a phone call to partner up with him and start a podcast.
Nice.
And since then we've become good friends, and we've hung out a bunch of times, and but yeah, it was just good timing.
Yeah, and you're also doing a lot more live events, in-person meetups. I wanted to talk about that. Do you feel that doing those is something that has strengthened your bond with your audience more so than it is? Because you're pretty active on your site, just engaging with all the comments. I remember, I wrote a comment and, within a few hours, boom, you responded. And then, everybody else was getting comments, and I was like, all right, like this guy's on top of his game,
Yeah, man. I mean, dude, it's all about the engagement. I think we get a little bit, and publishers, we get a little jaded by numbers because, I'm sure you look at your podcast downloads and you're seeing these big numbers that it becomes like monopoly money. You can't even visualize like what is 200,000 people. I don't know.
Yep.
It's like a stadium, and you forget that like when someone leaves a comment, like that is one individual person who clicked on your video and watched it and left a comment. So, meeting that person in real life is amazing. And even if we do a meetup and, 20 people show up, that's like a priceless time. I love doing that. And so, yeah, I think that's, it's not like scalable. It's not like a revenue driver or anything like that, but it's just a cool thing to do.
Now, you had mentioned when we were at the start about, WordPress, and I wanted to get into that because WordPress has seen such a massive evolution as of late, especially on the back end with the recent updates. Do you feel that the flexibility of WordPress makes it so entrepreneur friendly, or is it something where you kind of just jumped into the sandbox because everyone was there and you figured, this is it, and I'll learn it and then grow from there?
I think, so when I started building niche sites, like I don't even think Squarespace was a thing. So WordPress was like the default leader. I think Wix and some other stuff was around, but WordPress was just better. And I think the main thing that set it apart was it was just so easy to focus on SEO with WordPress. It's just a very like clean platform, and it's fast and secure, and kind of open source. So there's all these there's a plugin for everything.
Yep.
I still think it's by far the best platform to build a website. I used a theme for like, I don't know, 4 years, and then finally got a custom website developed. But, I think people get a little too hung up on the way their website looks, and they don't spend enough time on the content because, you can have the coolest, most flashy, user-friendly website in the world, but if the content sucks, it doesn't matter,
Agreed.
And on the flip side, you can have amazing content and just a plain text website and still going to be popular.
Yeah, I think I went through that phase, because my brand originally just started as just a brand for the podcast I was doing, and then it just snowballed into so many other things. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to make this site look like this. And then you start asking people, well, how do you like the site? And blah, blah, blah. And how does it look? And they're like, well, it should look like this. And before you know it, you spend 3 months trying to figure out what you want to put in the sidebar. And, that's 3 months that you're not doing content. So I definitely, it's paralysis analysis. Like, got caught up in that quite a bit. Now I just, I'm a little bit more split with how I do things. Like, if it looks okay and it doesn't look too terrible, I just keep writing, and putting out content.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard I can't remember who said this, but I heard somebody say basically if you're going to do something, ask yourself why 3 times. And so like if you're sitting there, it's Monday morning and you have a to-do list and you find yourself tweaking like a widget on the sidebar, maybe it's because you don't want to do something else in your to-do list, but ask yourself why you're doing that. And it probably comes down to some other reason. It's like maybe the real problem is that you need more traffic, in that case, the widget's not going to help with that, right? You gotta make some content. So, or, do some email reach out to do guest posts or something. So I think a lot of the times that can be a distraction. Not to say that it's not important, because the look and feel of your brand and the UX, it is important. It's just not the most important thing.
You mentioned email, and I wanted to talk about that because, you your emails are always, your newsletter email is always very nice, very neat. And I wanted to get into that because a lot of people, and I made that rookie mistake. They just bombed when it came time to build that email list. Is the email list now in 2019 still as vital as it was 5 years ago in your eyes?
I think a lot of people would say yes. I'm seeing a bit of a decline in email, and like a number of subscribers that I get every day, and open rates, click rates, and I don't think it's bad, or I don't think it's like a scary thing that's happening. I think people are just choosing to follow you elsewhere, like on Instagram and YouTube. So yeah, I guess the short answer is no. I don't think it's as valuable as it used to be. I still think email is really valuable and it's worth doing. But if you have an email list with 50,000 people, you might be able to get maybe a couple thousand or a few thousand people to your website with an email, but you're not going to get 50,000 people.
Right. That's where there's the disconnect with that. And the reason is because I kind of got into it late, and I'm like, man, I gotta build this up, and I gotta figure out how I'm gonna send it out, and if I'm gonna do it weekly, and then it becomes a thing of what you want to put in the email because you don't want to be ultra spammy with it. But I like how you do it, because especially your last year recap email was really good, because like, oh, here's if you want to read this income report, go here. If you want to see this, here. You included some personal snippets. You kept it very, very concise. And that was my next question. When you're putting together your email, how do you determine what's going to go in there? Obviously you want to put, hey, the most recent posts or whatever, but how do you curate your content for that audience without making it seem like an overabundance or just giving them too much?
That's a good question. And honestly, I don't know if I'm really doing it the optimal way. I mean, I know a lot of people will send an email and I think the traditional approach to email is like have a really compelling subject line, so they open it, and then have like one call to action.
Right.
Click this link, read this post. I don't like the clickbait subject lines, because I think it's like a downward spiral. Like once you do it, you have to keep doing it, and it gets more clickbaity, and you see this on YouTube too.
Yep.
So I want people on my email list to know that they're going to get every week or every 2 weeks, they're going to get an email that summarizes the content that was published since the last email, Right. So it's going to say, hey, since you last heard from us, we've got 2 new articles and 1 new video. And then in every email, there's going to be a little section for deals. So like, hey, here's 3 deals that are going on right now that you can check out. And that's it. And so it's more of like a digest. And if you don't like it, that's fine. If we have if I get lower open rates because the subject is just descriptive, it's not like exciting, that's fine too. But I think it's a more sustainable and kind of more honest way to do it,
No, I agree. And I think, and that was why I was asking that, because it's exactly that. The clickbaity titles and YouTube, like I said, is good for that. I mean, even the news uses that as well. It's like, hey, is the milk you're drinking every day killing you? And then you're waiting to see, and they save it for like the last 15 minutes of the newscast, and you're like, oh, this nonsense.
Yeah. Turns out, no, it's not killing you.
Yep, that's exactly it. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and definitely talk about, the bread and butter of the modest man, and that's men's fashion. Especially here in New York, New York is definitely very, very interesting when it comes to fashion, because it's a combination, a little bit of business casual, a lot of streetwear over the last, depending on where you're at in New York, and just a lot of comfort in between. And I wanted to talk to you about that, because I wanted, especially now that you're in New York more frequently, how do you feel about that division in terms of how fashion is portrayed in the Big Apple?
I think it's so cool, man. New York is one of the best dressed cities in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And every time I go there, I just want to up my game, like just to keep up with people, because I feel like people in New York just, I don't know, everybody's expressing themselves with what they wear. Yep. Versus in other places, like only like a small percentage of people seem to care. So I really love New York for that reason. And, I think the merging is really cool. It's to me, it seems kind of like the way music has gone. Like there are genres, but there's also like a lot of blending between genres, and some music doesn't even really fit into any genre.
Absolutely.
I think that's it's kind of how style is now. And I think that's super cool.
Where do you stand with like the streetwear aesthetic? And I ask because a lot of people, that a lot of style blogs, they're kind of like, don't go out wearing your joggers and your sneakers. Like, this is how you got to wear this for this. Like very, very regimented. And I wanted to ask, just as someone who's definitely still a streetwear guy. I mean, I was an 80s kid, and then crafted in the 90s to be finished off. So, and a New Yorker to boot. So it's like, Timberland jeans and yellow construction boots. That's like the default uniform,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you gotta, I mean, that's the thing about the clothes you wear. Like, you have to like them. They have to make you feel good. And if they're not, then you're just doing it wrong. It doesn't matter what anybody says, So I think, and I used to, my advice used to be much more prescriptive like that. Like, never wear brown shoes with a black suit, never wear blah, blah. And it's like, I try not to do that anymore, because it's like, first of all, wear whatever you want, Yep. But I do think that you should dress within the parameters of like an occasion that you're going to. So if you're going to a wedding, you should dress within the parameters of that dress code. Add your own personality to it, but like, know the rules, and once you know the rules, you can kind of play with them. So, the streetwear thing, I'm personally, it's not part of my aesthetic, but I have, nothing but respect for people who are into it.
Well, it's funny because there's such an interesting dynamic, like, especially in the sneaker culture, like, when Jordan did the sneakers with the patent leather on the front, you saw people wearing them with their tuxedos and wearing them to the prom. And don't get me wrong, I love a pair of Jordans as much as the next guy. But to your point, it's like, listen, I'm not wearing a pair of Jordans to my prom, or listen, man, I'm not wearing, when my wife and I got married, everybody's like, oh, because we did a destination wedding. They're like, man, you could wear like some Converse. I'm like, nope. I'm like, nope, not doing it. And so I definitely respect that, because I think that's the problem. I think that you still have to respect some of those timeless occasions where it's like, listen, you got to put on dress shoes. You got to put on a suit. You have to, it's like you just said, add your little tweaks, maybe you want to add some cool socks or an awesome bow tie or a cool pocket square. But listen, you got to wear the stuff,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like an example of that would be, say you're going to someone else's wedding and you're a menswear blogger and like you're really into it and you love dressing up. But if you're going to someone else's wedding, like, you shouldn't show up with like a super fitted suit with like double monks and no socks and a pocket square and a tie clip and a watch. And like, you shouldn't show up like trying to steal the groom's thunder, basically. Like, have respect for the occasion and kind of know your role. And it's okay to maybe add some interest to your outfit or maybe stand out a little bit, but I think it's just important to kind of know where you are and then respect that, and then you can kind of add your personality in a more subtle way.
I think that that's that originality and keeping that part of the aesthetic alive is where people kind of get lost. And it was funny because I was talking to a buddy of mine and we were talking about that when you go to school, they don't teach you how to do your taxes. They don't teach you how to balance your checkbook. They don't even teach you how to cook anymore, and it's like, I think for men and for women, at least a business class or just learning how to, once you get into that real world, like what you said, just, hey, like, what am I going to wear for a job interview? Like, how many times I used to ask like other people I knew, like, hey, I got this job interview. What do you think I should wear? Because that just doesn't exist. I mean, now obviously in 2019 with the internet and everything else, there's countless people, guys like you and others that are putting out great content, just pointing people in that direction. But there was never ever a blueprint growing up. Like most of us, we kind of looked at our dads, if we had one, as the style to follow or kind of a general idea. And then, obviously TV and everything else influenced it. But I feel that growing up, that was something that was just lost. It was a lost art form. Nobody knew, like, hey, you got to wear dress socks, and these are dress socks, and these are, loafers. Everybody was like, my grandfather wears penny loafers, and that's it.
Yeah, it's totally missing from education. There's just basic life skills, and it's funny because we kind of look back on the days where they had home ec class and wood shop and all that, and we're like, oh, that's so outdated and so old school. It's like, no, I actually would love a home ec class. Like, man, I'd love to know how to cook and hem my own pants. That's
why companies like HelloFresh are making so much money, because nobody took a home ec class.
Exactly.
That's the niche right there. I mean, my mom, I remember she taught me how to cook and my brother how to sew. And that's how she did it. Cause I'm not good at it. She was like, you're going to learn this and you learn this and you kind of meet in the middle. And it was because, those were skills we just didn't have. And don't get me wrong, my brother can stitch a button, do something very quickly, but it's a valuable skill to have. And it's just something that's so lost now.
It is. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. And like basic accounting and just like the basic life skills, how to do your taxes, like,
Yep.
I don't know why they don't teach that stuff.
Nope. Credit being the big one. Oh, we're not going to teach you about credit. And then when you get out of college and you applied for 7 cards when you were, at the admissions office, because they were outside setting up tables. If you remember those days.
Right. Oh yeah, totally. That's where I got my first credit card, man.
There you go. I wanted to switch gears before we jump into the hot seat. I wanted to talk about your partnership with Peter Manning. I remember when you put out the post announcing that, and I said to myself, damn, that's a product of hard work. The origins of that partnership are within that post, but I kind of wanted you to share a little bit of that story with our audience, just to show, how far that hard work brought you.
Yeah, totally, man. I had what I mentioned earlier in our interview. I wanted that first company to send me free stuff, and that first company to buy banner ad space. That was Peter Manning. And so when I first started Modest Man, I didn't know that this clothing company had started out of New York by this guy named Peter Manning, that was for men 5'8" and under. And at the time, there were a couple brick and mortar shops that focused on the shorter guy, but there was really nothing like it. No online company. And so, once we found each other, it was like, wow, this is a match made in heaven. And they bought advertising that first month for, I think, $200, and they haven't missed a month since then. So they've been my longest term advertiser, super loyal, a perfect fit because I was wearing out their clothes all the time anyway. And what was cool about them is, they didn't just, they wanted traffic and, they wanted the exposure, but they'd send stuff just asking for feedback. So like they'd send a pair of chinos and say, hey, what do you think about like the leg opening, And so we kind of were working together that way, like way before it was official. And then, so fast forward, like 5 years, I've met the Peter Manning team a few times. They've continued to increase their ad spend. They've grown a lot. Like they have a whole clothing line now. And last year I was thinking about starting my own clothing line because I'm thinking, okay, how do I take Modest Man to the next level? Right. I don't want to just keep doing sponsorships. Like I need a product, I need to turn this into an actual business. And so I was considering starting my own clothing line and, we're partnering with somebody else. I was talking to a couple of potential partners, and I talked to the guys at Peter Manning, and they were like, "Hey, why don't you come work with us for a while, and kind of get your feet wet in the industry, see how clothes are made, the back end, the supply chain, and the product development side of it, and help us with digital marketing." And so we made that official, and I think since like May of last year, I've been going up to New York once a month, helping with all that stuff, product dev, photo shoots, digital marketing, and it's been awesome.
It's an amazing culmination of such an an awesome journey, and to see that and to see you be involved on such an intimate level with a brand that kind of believed in you from the start is just a great way to kind of bring everything full circle.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it is. It feels like it was years in the making, and I'm really happy with the partnership so far. So I think there's so much growth. There's so much potential with Peter Manning. Already doing really well, but it's just such a. We always say that the world doesn't need another fashion company, but they need this one because this market is so underserved, and it's not uncommon to see people having like emotional experiences in the showroom. And it sounds funny because we're talking about clothes, but imagine like a 55-year-old guy who's like literally never put on a shirt that fits, and his wife drags him into the Peter Manning fit shop in New York, and he puts on, she forces him to put on a shirt and it fits perfectly. I mean, I've seen guys tear up, because it's like they just feel like they've been ignored for so long. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's such a crazy thing, especially because it's like you go out there and it's either too big, too small, too tight, too loose. It's I everybody jokes about it like everybody who's 5'6" wishes that they had a Goldilocks moment where everything is just right.
Right.
Just right shirt, just right pants, and it's funny because like if I buy a pair of sweats and they fit perfectly, I'm like, damn it, now I got to buy 6 pairs of these because they'll probably stop making them. And next thing you know, it's like, wow, you have a lot of gray sweats. Yes, I do.
Yep.
That's how it goes. And it's crazy too, just because, finding exactly that, a company and a brand that represents you as an individual so well is just, it's hard to find because everybody's just, it's a one size fits all world. And unfortunately, that's not how it's supposed to be.
I agree.
All right. So, I think that's a good way to close things out and take us into the hot seat. For those that aren't familiar, the hot seat is a series of just rapid fire questions, nothing too crazy, that allows us to just learn a little bit more about our guests and get some insight into, what they do for work and play. So, as somebody who runs a business, obviously your mobile device is paramount to that. What are you using?
I have the iPhone 10, or is it the iPhone X?
The iPhone 10.
iPhone 10. I have the iPhone 10, the regular one, not the big one. And I really like it. It's a great phone.
When you turn on your phone, what's the first app you go to?
Oh man. Let's see. On my home screen, I've got Reddit, Gmail, YouTube, Kindle, and then I've got my Hue lights.
Nice. Those are pretty good. Are you a laptop or a desktop user?
Laptop. I got a 13-inch spec'd out MacBook Pro.
Nice. And you do all your video editing and podcasting, I'm assuming right through that, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's like home base. That's what I do everything through. And I've got at the studio, I've got a 4K monitor that I plug it into.
Nice. For your podcast, you mentioned you edit with Adobe Audition, right?
Yeah. I record right into Audition, do a little bit of editing in there.
What's your favorite piece of tech besides your phone and your computer?
Oh man, I'm loving my camera. I actually just upgraded from a Canon Rebel T6i to a Panasonic GH5, which is like, going from like a Honda to like a Mercedes. So that's been fun.
Yeah, that camera's intense, especially because it doesn't have a recording limit.
Oh,
which is nice.
Dude, it's crazy.
Nice. That's very nice. Make sure you get yourself a speed booster adapter for lenses.
I need to do that. 'Cause right now I'm using native Lumix lenses, but yeah, I got to get that speed booster.
Yeah, when you get that, it becomes a whole other ball game. Do you work with or without music?
I usually work with instrumental music, just kind of background music.
What's something that you've purchased recently that's under $100 that's made your life easier or more enjoyable?
Oh man, that's a great question. Let's see. You know what I find? So I've been like sprucing up the studio, and I finally got this like clothing rack, and it was just a cheap one from Target. It was like $50, and it's great. So that you're gonna start seeing that in videos because it's awesome.
Nice. As long as it works for you, that's the name of the game. Obviously, it wouldn't be a toys and tech podcast without talking a little bit about toys. What was your favorite toy or collectible growing up?
Growing up, I was into the X-Men cards.
Nice.
Yeah. I had the whole series 2, almost the whole series 4.
That's pretty awesome. It's funny because a buddy of mine, I collect comics, and I actually gave him my X-Men cards and my series 1 and 2 of the Marvel cards with the holograms.
Oh yeah, those holograms are sweet.
Oh man, and it's funny too because people go crazy. They're like, wow, you still have those? I'm like, yeah, and I gave those away just because I'm downsizing a lot of that stuff. What's something you collect now besides clothes?
Yeah, well, I definitely I collect watches, but not in that I try to have a lot of them. I just try to have like a super curated collection.
Nice.
But yeah, I am into watches.
Which are the brands of choice for watches?
So right now, my collection consists of Seiko, Hamilton, and Rolex.
Got to have that one Rolex to put on for those special occasions. People are like, oh, a Rolex on, very nice.
You know what's funny, man? When I got it, I was like, oh man, like it feels like this like bling. Everybody's gonna notice. No one has said anything. No one notices. The only people who notice are other watch people, and they're just like, you get the little nod, like nice.
It's funny. There's a podcaster. He's a personal trainer, Jason Ferrugia, he goes, listen, nobody, you could wear sweatpants and a t-shirt, but you got a nice Rolex on, man. It's like people know, like exactly what you just said. You get the nod, like they know, like, yeah, this guy's about his business.
Right. Yeah. When I see someone else too with like, it doesn't have to be a Rolex, but just like any watch they've clearly thought about, they're clearly into watches. I always say something because I know that, they care. So I'm like, hey man, nice Hamilton, or, oh, cool Seiko,
Nice. Now, what's a big style mistake that a lot of people frequently make?
I mean, number one for sure is just wearing clothes that are too big for them. Pants that are too long, sleeves that are too long, or just one size too big. Honestly, just like most guys just need to size down.
Okay. What are 3 must-have men's fashion essentials you recommend?
I think one would be the Oxford cotton button-down, OCBD, which is, just a kind of a thick, casual button-up shirt. White, gray, light blue, something neutral. Another one would be some sort of like minimal sneaker. Like I really like a white leather minimal sneaker, or something like Common Projects, but you could go way more affordable than that. If you don't like sneakers, I'd say that the flip side of that would be like a boot, just like a brown leather boot. That's number 2. And then number 3 for sure would be dark wash denim.
Nice. With that, any particular brand you're a fan of for denim?
Well, self-promotion here, but I like Peter Mange because they have a skinny fit that fits me really well, and you can get it in like a 26 or 27 inch inseam, so I don't need to hem it. But I think most guys will be able to find something from Levi's that'd be like my budget option that fits well because they have so many different cuts. Uniqlo is also a really good option.
I actually started messing with them a little bit. It's weird just because their stuff is cut very small, but I've been getting a lot of their their cold weather essentials because I hate wearing coats. So I get like the heat gear, like
heat tech,
the heat tech, the base layers and stuff like that, and just throw that under a sweatshirt, and I'm good for the day.
Yeah, dude, same. I don't like wearing like giant parkas, so I'll just wear like 3 layers instead.
Nice. What's a company that people should look out for, obviously, besides Modest Man, that you're watching too?
Are we talking like content creators or like
in general, just a company that you're like, that's a company that's got it together. Just, it doesn't matter the space, just a company you feel that's a company to look out for.
Yeah, I think on YouTube, I definitely want to shout out to a couple, like, I want to say up and coming, but they're growing so fast. They're not small channels anymore, but there's a channel called Huga, Hueguh, which is really, really cool. Just awesome production quality. There's another one, Tim DeSaint, which is similar. These are both men's style guys, but just like really fun videos to watch.
Okay.
And then in the clothing accessory space, I really like, there's some really cool new shoe companies. Thursday Boots is a favorite of mine. Greats, Koyo, basically anytime you're about to buy like a shoe, like look for these smaller direct to consumer brands because they're offering a lot more value than the department stores these days. Nice.
All right. Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead, who would it be and what would you have?
Man, that's a great question. Alive or dead? Jeez. Well, all right. So alive, it would for sure be Tim Ferriss, and I'd just buy him whatever he wanted to eat and just say thanks for writing 4-Hour Work Week.
Nice.
Probably get him some red wine and some like Argentinian steak. I think that's probably what he would want.
That's about right.
I think dead. I'd probably have dinner with my grandpa.
Okay.
Because I was a teenager when he died, and now that I'm older, I'd have a whole new set of questions I wanted to ask him. And he was Irish, so we'd probably have some whiskey and like, I don't know, like potatoes or something.
Nice. little bangers and mash.
Yeah, exactly.
My wife is part Irish, so yeah, I know a little about that.
Yep.
All right. So as always, we try to add, obviously besides the interview and our hot seat questions, we like to add a little value. So we have a section called Reach One, Teach One. As someone who has built a brand from the ground up and are slowly reaping the fruits of your labor, what's something you could tell somebody that's just getting started, that's actionable that they could start today?
So I'd say, assuming like your basic needs are met, like, you're not in crazy debt, like, you've got food on the table. Don't don't waste time. Like if you're in your 20s, especially, don't waste time doing stuff you don't want to do. Like don't stay in a job that you hate. Don't even worry about like getting a big salary or something in your 20s. If you have school debt and stuff, try to pay it off, but like just don't worry about the money at that point in life. I'm not saying not to save money, like definitely have a 401k, IRA, max it out. That's part of your basic needs, but just don't stay in a job you hate. Try to actively find what you actually like doing and then try to get really good at it. And if you don't like something, move on. Because I think the 20s and 30s are just so precious, and I wish I had spent less time in my 20s doing stuff I didn't want to do.
That's a hell of a piece of advice right there.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough though, because you feel like you need money, and everybody else is doing it, but it's just 20s is a time to experiment and find yourself, and it's not a time to become a career person.
No, it's it's funny. Fight Club is one of my favorite books, and it's funny about books that we've read that have changed our lives. It's doing a job you hate to get money you need to buy things you don't want.
Exactly. Yeah, things you won't end up owning you.
That's it. There you go. I think that's a great way to close things out. Brock, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share the toys and tech of your trade.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
All right, that wraps up our interview with Brock from The Modest Man. Huge thanks to him for taking the time out of his busy schedule to give us some fashion advice, some business advice, and everything in between. We'll have links in the show notes for this episode of where you can find Brock and all of his content, as well as some of the recommendations and items that were mentioned in the interview. Some of those items may be affiliate links. As always, full transparency. If you purchase something through those links, we may get a small commission, which of course goes towards giving you guys a better experience, whether it's video, audio, or written on the site. I always want to keep that out there and let you guys know that your support and your purchases go towards making RageWorks bigger and better for each and every one of you. In 2 weeks, we're going to continue the RageWorks Creator Series, and we're going to be sitting down with Call Me When It's Over's Josie's boy. It was an amazing conversation. We're going to talk about not only his art, the birth of Call Me When It's Over, but a lot of the brushes, paints, and other things he uses to create content, both on the canvas and on the air. It's going to be an exciting interview. I look forward to sharing it with you guys. For those of you that are going to be in the New York City area and are covering Toy Fair, RageWorks will be there the weekend of the 16th through the 18th. So if you are planning to attend and would like to meet face to face and either, catch up and talk some toys or anything else, feel free to look me up. You can always find me on Instagram at RageWorks. We're going to be sharing audio, video, maybe a couple of Instagram lives from the event. One of those days I'll be joined by Jimbo Slice as well. So we're going to be giving you guys content all through the course of the event. If you're a fan of action figures and collectibles, etc., you're definitely going to want to keep it locked to RageWorks this coming weekend to check out all of our content from the Toy Fair floor. As always, you can keep up with RageWorks on social media. As I said, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. But the best way to reach out, as always, is to email me, rich@rageworks.net, or use the contact form on the site. If you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, feel free to reach out via the mediums I just mentioned, and we will definitely set something up. I want to thank all of you who have been supporting this brand new podcast, downloading the episodes, sharing your insights, and giving me guest recommendations. Definitely making a note of some of the people you guys would like to hear about on future episodes, and we're going to definitely do our best to get as many of them on as possible. Thank you guys for checking out this episode. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Peace.
We expect a lot from our homes. They're more than a place to hang your hat. They're where you try your hand at gardening and new recipes. Rest and recharge. Work and play. And that's why at Home Advisor, we're committed to keeping your home up and running. Whether you need to repair an overloaded appliance or you're looking to create a backyard retreat worthy of a summer staycation, use the Home Advisor app, day or night, and we'll find a local pro to get the job done right. Whatever you need, we'll do everything to fix your everything. Download the Home Advisor app today to get started.
The outcome of an opioid emergency may depend on a quick response. Accidental overdose can happen anytime, even if the opioid pain medicine is prescribed. Due to COVID-19, emergency services could be slower to arrive. Get prepared. Get naloxone, a potentially life-saving reversal agent with no prescription directly from your pharmacy. Having naloxone available allows you to respond first, not a substitute for emergency medical care. Learn more at opioidsafetyplan.com. That's OPIOID safetyplan.com.